It's wonderful to be back in York. I was lucky enough to live in this beautiful city when my partner was studying for a master's degree at the university here, actually. Now, her thesis was on whether there would ever be a joint European army, and whether that might even include Russia. Safe to say, some debates age better than others. However, just a few years before that, the then Russian President, one Vladimir Putin, had even discussed joining NATO with Bill Clinton. That was just over 20 years ago, but it feels like another lifetime. Today, we look out to a world more divided and dangerous than at any time since the Cold War. The security guarantees we once took for granted have been shaken to their core by Donald Trump. By casting doubt on America's commitment to NATO's Article 5, he has thrown our collective security into question. His illegal attacks on Venezuela and Iran have trampled on international law, as he has tried to twist international politics in a system of might equals right. Vladimir Putin has been only too eager to take advantage of the opportunities created by Trump. He cannot believe his luck to have the Donald back in the White House. A man the former KGB agent has no trouble wrapping around his little finger. We learned yesterday that instead of choking off Russia's war economy, Trump has agreed to line Putin's war chest by lifting US sanctions on Russian oil and gas. Shameful. Putin continues to prosecute his barbaric war in Ukraine and expanding his campaign of sabotage, disinformation and espionage across Europe, including here in Britain. The defining challenge for our nation, then, is how we meet those unprecedented threats. And it will require thinking about defence in a new way. Because to stand up for the liberal values we cherish, we must be strong enough to defend them. Conference, the task before us is clear: to rearm Britain, to rebuild our alliances, to renew our national resilience. That is what this moment requires, and that is what the Liberal Democrats are ready to do. Conference, in this new era, the first duty is to rebuild our alliances. Trump's chaos has made restoring ties with Europe a national security priority. Britain is safer when we stand together with Europe. In the face of Putin's imperialism and Trump's bullying, we cannot afford to drift, and Labour's so-called EU reset has fallen well short of what this moment demands. What Britain needs now is seriousness, real ambition, real urgency. Take the EU's €150 billion safe rearmament fund. This is not some Brussels side issue. The Prime Minister should personally lead negotiations to get UK access. British firms should be central to Europe's rearmament. Military cooperation and closer alignment are good for Britain, good for Europe, and good for NATO. In a more dangerous world, our alliances are not a luxury, they are a necessity. Nowhere is that clearer than in Ukraine. Last month, we marked 4 years since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion. 4 years of a sovereign nation fighting courageously, not just for its land, but for its right to exist. And as Ukrainians begin their 5th year of resistance, Putin's depravity has plumbed new depths. I don't think there is anything that better captures the cruelty of Putin's actions than the abduction of more than 20,000 Ukrainian children, a crime that will go down in history. And as a parent of 2 small children myself, I can only imagine the pain of not knowing where your child is, or even if they're alive. For Putin, this war is not just about territory. It is about erasing a nation. Conference, he will not succeed. Britain must stand by our heroic Ukrainian friends for as long as it takes, and that must mean more than just words. It must mean using Britain's power, financial, diplomatic, economic, against Putin's war machine. That is why the 30 billion in Russian assets frozen in the UK should be seized and made available to Ukraine immediately. That is not radical, It is responsible and it is long overdue. And if the City of London is helping to ensure the oil and gas that fund Putin's war chest, then the city must stop. In 2025, UK-insured tankers transported nearly 50 billion of Russian fossil fuels. That is billions flowing straight into Putin's war machine. It has to end. That is why I am calling for a complete ban on all UK services for the transport and insurance of Russian oil, Russian gas and Russian coal. No more British business helping to bankroll Putin's barbarism. Conference. The second task is to rearm Britain for the changing nature of warfare. Because rearmament is not a slogan, it is a governing test. Yet even now, we still have no defence investment plan. The plan was promised for last summer. It was meant to turn the Strategic Defence Review from warm words into hard action. Only in Whitehall could something promised as urgent disappear for a year and still be described as progressing. But that delay matters, because at this very moment, Europe is rearming, Britain is hesitating. And that hesitation sends signals to our armed forces, signals to industry, signals to our allies and our adversaries. What signal does it send when Poland and Germany are moving and Britain is still waiting for a plan? That hesitation has real consequences for British defence companies, for sovereign capability, for supply chains, for skilled jobs, and for our national security. Recently, dithering over a new contract for the new medium helicopter programme put at risk the future of helicopter building in Yeovil and across the UK. But luckily, Yeovil has a Lib Dem MP. Adam Dance's tireless campaigning helped force ministers to act, safeguarding more than 3,000 jobs. That is good news for Yeovil, and it is good news for Britain. But the wider point is bigger than one contract. If Britain wants credible defence, Britain needs credible industrial confidence. Because when Britain talks about defence, it sends signals to the world. And right now, too often, the signal from this government is drift. Even the current limited defensive deployment in the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East has exposed how stretched our forces really are, thanks to years of Conservative cuts. The army is at its smallest size in more than 200 years. The Royal Navy is struggling to meet its commitments, and all the while, the nature of warfare is changing before our eyes. Drones that cost $25,000 are being shot down with missiles costing $1 million. The lessons from Ukraine and now from the US-Israeli assault on Iran is clear. Innovative defence technologies procured rapidly, resupplied rapidly, are now as vital as tanks, ships and jets. The most senior British commanders have warned that we are not ready for a conflict. The evidence is plain. So Britain needs urgent investment in defence. Britain needs procurement that is faster, smarter and more accountable. And Britain needs to prepare for the wars of the future, not the habits of the past. And that is why we are proposing defence bonds. Because serious threats require serious funding. Defence bonds would raise £20 billion over 2 years and invest directly in the capabilities our armed forces need. They would attract funding from the financial markets, but they would also be available to the public. A secure way for people to invest their savings while helping to strengthen Britain's national defence. A chance to back our armed forces, a chance to back our security, a chance to back Britain. But rearming Britain is about more than spending. It is about spending better. The Ministry of Defence has a dismal record on major projects, and that must change. The Ajax armoured vehicle should already be in service. Instead, the £6 billion programme is years overdue, with soldiers on a recent exercise taken to hospital after emerging shaking and vomiting from the vehicle. Ajax is not just a bad project, it is a warning. Too slow, too expensive, too complacent, too trapped in a culture of too big to fail. So if Britain is serious about rearmament, Britain must also be serious about change. That means overhauling procurement, linking defence spending to wider industrial strategy, and investing properly in research and development. Because defence investment should strengthen our armed forces and strengthen our economy. And let me say this about the Conservatives. After a decade of hollowing out our armed forces, they now have no credible plan to rebuild them. Their answer is to cut support for renewable energy and slash welfare. That is not strategic thinking. That is just old Tory thinking in a harder hat. And in a world where oil prices surge and dictators weaponize energy, weakening energy security does not make Britain stronger, it makes Britain weaker. More exposed to shocks, more dependent on petrostates, more vulnerable to men like Putin. You do not strengthen national defence by weakening energy security, and you do not protect our nation by making the poorest pay the price. Nigel Farage is trying to fill the vacuum left by the Conservatives on defence. Yet he doesn't even bother to appoint a shadow defence secretary. He's more interested in flying out to Mar-a-Lago to chum up with Donald Trump, who denigrates the sacrifices made by our troops. That should tell you everything you need to know about his priorities. Conference's third ask is to renew our national resilience by backing the people who serve. Because defence is not just about budgets, platforms and procurement lines, it's about the men and women who put on the uniform. It is about whether the country they serve values them in return. There has been some progress. The government accepted Liberal Democrat amendments in the House of Lords to introduce a decent home standard for service family accommodation. That should be welcomed. But it is not enough. A nation that asks people to serve must at the very least house them with dignity. And national resilience does not end when service ends. No veteran should ever be punished for putting their country first. And yet too often, the system still lets our veterans down. Those who leave the military must not be abandoned once they step out of uniform. They deserve proper support in the transition to civilian life. So this is what Liberal Democrat defence means in practice. Not a shopping list, not a slogan, a doctrine for a more dangerous world. Rearm Britain, rebuild our alliances, renew our national resilience. It means standing with Ukraine and facing down Putin. It means rebuilding Britain's ties with Europe because our alliances are a source of strength. It means rearming for the changing nature of warfare and paying for that seriously. It means backing British industry and reforming procurement, and it means renewing the bond between the nation and those who serve it. Because in a more dangerous world, defence is not a departmental afterthought. It is the foundation of our security and freedom, and it also means being absolutely clear about what those foundations look like. We are committed to NATO. We are committed to international law, and we are committed to our continuous at-sea nuclear deterrent, the ultimate guarantee of our security in the face of Putin's ambitions. Others would make Britain less secure. The Greens would withdraw from NATO and abandon our nuclear deterrent. That is not idealism. It is an abdication. Liberal Democrats will never compromise the security of this country. Conference, this is the age we live in. The old assumptions are gone. The world has changed, and Britain must change with it. In 2011, Paddy Ashdown said in a talk that the United States would remain the most powerful nation on earth for another 10 or 15 years, but that the context in which they hold power had radically altered. Well, it's now 15 years later. And typically, Paddy was right. As a former Royal Marine, though, he also embodied something else. Our party's proud tradition of patriotism, service, and national duty. A tradition that is embodied today in the 8 current Liberal Democrat MPs who themselves are veterans and who I am very proud to call my colleagues. So let that be our message now. In this more dangerous world, Britain has to be ready. Ready to rearm Britain, ready to rebuild our alliances, ready to renew our national resilience, ready to show that liberalism is not the politics of standing back, but of standing up. for our security, for our servicemen and women, for our allies and for our country. Conference, this is our moment to lead, and Britain cannot afford for us to fail. Thank you.